Imagine you're a teacher. You are just standing in the hallway, minding your own business, when suddenly a student comes sprinting past you at top speed.
Right, which is completely against the rule.
Exactly. So your immediate instinct, understandably, is to yell at them to stop. You raise your voice, you give them a stern reprimand, and, in your mind, you are punishing that behavior.
Yeah, you're trying to set a boundary.
Right. But, and this is the crazy part, what if I told you that mathematically you might have just handed that kid a massive reward?
I mean, it is a completely counterintuitive reality. Society looks at a teacher yelling and immediately categorizes it as a penalty.
Oh, absolutely.
But human neurology doesn't really care about societal categories.
And that is the exact paradigm shift we are tackling today. So welcome to a very special edition of Behavioral Intelligence con Mara Sánchez.
So glad to be here.
If you are listening to this deep dive right now, you are likely, deep in the trenches, prepping for a major professional milestone, the BCBA exam.
Oh yeah, the big one.
Right. And today we are mastering domain B, specifically B.4. We're going fundamentally deep into how to identify and distinguish between positive and negative reinforcement contingencies.
Which is notoriously like one of the most deceptively tricky areas of the entire exam.
It really is.
Because you think you know what the words positive and negative mean from your everyday life, right? But the test writers, they know exactly how to use your everyday assumptions against you.
They completely weaponize our common sense. It's brutal. So our mission today is to rewire how you look at consequences. We are pulling insights from a massive stack of BCBA mock exams, ethical guidelines, and ABA study guides.
And we are stripping away all the morality. We are looking exclusively at the behavioral mathematics.
Yes, strictly the math. And just as a quick housekeeping note before we really get into the weeds, this deep dive is specifically engineered for your BCBA exam study purposes. And if you're looking for an edge, you absolutely need to follow Amethyst Therapy Services. We will give you their info a bit later, but they are an incredible resource for exactly this kind of rigorous preparation.
Having the right mental framework for this exam is everything. And to build that framework, we really have to start by completely redefining the word reinforcement.
Right, because the way the general public uses the word is, it's basically as a synonym for a prize, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like you do a good job, you get some positive reinforcement, it's a gold star.
But in applied behavior analysis, we are talking about operant conditioning. And operant conditioning simply means that a behavior is controlled by what happens as a result of that behavior.
Precisely. Your brain is constantly running this internal algorithm. It performs an action, and then it waits to see what happens next in the environment.
Always scanning.
Always. And the ultimate unbreakable rule of reinforcement in this science is this. A consequence is only a reinforcer if it increases or maintains the future frequency of a behavior. That is it.
Just the future frequency.
Right. If the behavior doesn't happen more often in the future, or at least maintain its current rate, then whatever you did, it was not reinforcement.
Okay, let's unpack this. What if a parent gives a crying child a cookie just to soothe them in the middle of a grocery store?
Oh, classic scenario.
Right. The parent's intention is just to stop the crying right then and there. But let's say the next day, the child cries even more intensely when they want something. Are you saying the cookie reinforced the crying?
Yes.
Because if the intention was just to soothe the child, shouldn't the child eventually learn that the cookie means they are safe, not that they should scream louder? Like, why does the brain completely bypass the parent's good intention?
This raises an important question, and it highlights the exact trap that test writers love to set. The human brain does not speak English.
That's a great way to put it.
It doesn't understand the complex social nuance of a parent's internal intention. The brain speaks in neurochemicals. It speaks in dopamine and immediate environmental changes.
Right, it's just looking for the payoff.
Exactly. When the child cried, their environment instantly improved with the delivery of a high-sugar, highly preferred item.
So the brain essentially logs that as a highly successful survival tactic.
Precisely. The brain says, wow, making that loud noise resulted in a massive caloric reward. I should absolutely do that again the next time I want something.
Wow.
You only know a consequence's true function by observing its effect on future behavior. The intention of the adult giving the cookie is completely irrelevant to the equation.
Completely irrelevant.
Yes, the only thing that matters is the data. Did the frequency of the trying go up? Yes.
Yeah.
Therefore, reinforcement occurred.
That is wild. I mean, it really is just an equation. Behavior happens, consequence follows, future behavior goes up.
Yep. You could give someone $100 every time they finish a spreadsheet, but if they hate the job and they stop doing spreadsheets, that $100 wasn't a reinforcer.
The data tells the story, not the item itself. The subjective value of the consequence, it only matters if it actually drives future action.
Exactly right.
So, now that we have established that reinforcement always, and I mean always, means an increase or maintenance of behavior, let's look at the first mechanism for achieving that increase. And that's by adding something to the environment.
Which brings us to positive reinforcement.
Right.
And here we have to do some severe vocabulary unlearning. In your everyday life, positive means good, happy, or beneficial.
Good vibes.
Yeah, good vibes. But you have to scrub that from your mind for this exam.
We are strictly talking about a plus sign, just mathematics.
Yes, positive simply means addition. Positive reinforcement is the presentation or addition of a stimulus immediately following a response, which then increases the future frequency of that response.
Okay.
Usually it's an appetitive or preferred stimulus. But the fundamental mechanism is simply the addition of something new to the environment.
I was looking at a really classic clinical case study from the sources earlier that illustrates this perfectly. It was about a learner named Tommy, and he was doing discrete trial training.
Oh, DTT, right?
Yeah, and for those newer to the specific terminology, DTT is basically breaking down a complex skill into very small, distinct, teachable steps. So the therapist places a picture card on the table and asks, "What is it?"
Okay.
When Tommy correctly identifies the item, the therapist immediately gives him a goldfish cracker.
It's a very clear, highly controlled contingency.
Right. Because he receives the cracker, that is the addition, the plus sign, and he continues to correctly identify items in the future. That is the increase. This is a textbook example of positive reinforcement.
The environment changed because something was added to it contingent on his specific response. And honestly, we engineer these contingencies in our own lives constantly.
Oh, I do it every single day.
Really?
Like what?
Well, if I manage to clean the kitchen and load the dishwasher before 8:00 p.m., my rule is that I earn a glass of wine for doing it.
That's a great setup.
It works. The glass of wine is actively added to my evening. And because of that, the statistical likelihood of me cleaning the kitchen before 8:00 p.m. tomorrow goes way up. The plus sign drives the future behavior. But it's vital to remember that positive reinforcement doesn't care about your health or your morals or the school rules. It just cares about the plus sign.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Positive reinforcement can absolutely fuel maladaptive, destructive behaviors too. And this brings us right back to our opening scenario with the hall monitor.
Ah, yes. The teacher yelling at the student running down the hallway.
Right.
Yes, this is the phenomenon of social positive reinforcement. Because, to society, yelling is a reprimand. It's a punishment.
But the data tells a totally different story.
Exactly. From an evolutionary standpoint, human beings are deeply social creatures. We are hardwired to crave attention and connection because historically isolation meant danger.
Right. If you were alone, you didn't survive.
Exactly. So for some learners, any attention, even intense negative attention like yelling, is incredibly stimulating. By yelling, the teacher has actively added a massive amount of high-intensity attention to that student's environment.
It's a huge plus sign.
It is.
So if the student continues to sprint down the hallway in the future just to get a rise out of the teacher, that yelling wasn't a punishment at all. It functioned perfectly as positive reinforcement. The behavior went up, and a stimulus was added.
It requires you to really step back and look at the functional relationship rather than what the behavior just looks like on the surface.
Yeah.
You have to isolate the variables.
Okay, so if positive reinforcement is about adding a stimulus to increase behavior, we have to look at the flip side of the coin. What happens when we subtract a stimulus to increase a behavior?
And this leads us directly into what might be the single most misunderstood concept in the entire field of behavior analysis.
Negative reinforcement.
It is endlessly confused, even among professionals, because again, negative sounds like it means bad. People constantly confuse it with punishment.
But if we stick to our math rule, negative simply means a minus sign. It means subtracting, removing, or terminating something from the environment.
Precisely. Negative reinforcement is the removal, termination, or reduction of an aversive stimulus immediately following a behavior, which in turn increases the future frequency of that behavior.
So the behavior goes up because doing it successfully got rid of something annoying, painful, or unwanted.
Yeah.
I always think of it like taking off a really tight pair of shoes at the end of a long day.
Oh, the best feeling.
Right. The behavior is taking off the shoes. The consequence isn't that you get a prize. The consequence is the removal of the pinching pain. That immediate wave of relief is the reinforcer.
That is a perfect analogy because it highlights the biological reality of relief. Our brains are wired for survival. When you remove an immediate threat or discomfort, like the pain from tight shoes, your brain triggers a massive release of relief.
And that relief teaches you what to do next time.
It aggressively hardwires your brain to repeat whatever action just saved you from the discomfort. This is the entire science of escape and avoidance.
Let's break those two down because the sources we are looking at make a really important distinction between escape and avoidance.
Yeah, so escape is when the aversive stimulus is already happening to you and your behavior stops it.
Okay.
Avoidance is when your behavior prevents the aversive stimulus from ever happening in the first place. Both rely entirely on the minus sign of negative reinforcement.
There was a great clinical example of escape in one of the mock exams. There is a 12-year-old student named Kofi, and he absolutely dreads math tasks. He finds them highly aversive.
Poor kid.
Right, so he is constantly trying to escape the classroom when the math worksheets come out. His teacher gets clever and implements a negative reinforcement schedule. Every time Kofi finishes one math problem, he is allowed to take his pencil and cross out another problem on the worksheet so he doesn't have to do it.
It is a brilliant, elegant intervention. The aversive stimulus is the overwhelming wall of math problems. By completing a problem, Kofi earns the right to remove a piece of that aversive stimulus.
It's a subtraction. The extra problem is gone.
Exactly. And because the number of math problems he actually completes goes up, it is, by definition, reinforcement.
We fall into these escape contingencies naturally all the time, too. Like, think about driving your car. You haven't buckled your seatbelt yet, and the car starts making that horrible, high-pitched dinging sound.
Ugh, the worst.
That sound is an engineered aversive stimulus. You buckle your seatbelt, and the sound is instantly removed. The minus sign happens. In the future, you are far more likely to buckle your seatbelt to escape that noise.
That's a classic escape contingency. But avoidance is where the psychology gets a little more complex.
So what does this all mean for avoidance? Like, escape makes total sense. The noise is happening, you plug the seatbelt in, the noise stops, the map is right in front of you. But how does avoidance work if the bad thing hasn't even happened yet?
Right, it's abstract.
Yeah, how do you mentally or mathematically subtract something that isn't currently in the room with you?
What's fascinating here is the concept of the warning stimulus. In behavior analysis, this is known as a conditioned motivating operation reflexive, or CMOR.
That is a massive mouthful of jargon. Break that down for me.
I know, it is. Think of a CMOR as your brain's internal alarm system. It is a signal in your environment that warns you a worsening condition is rapidly approaching.
Okay, an alarm.
Over time, through your learning history, you realize that this specific signal means trouble is coming unless you do something about it right now.
Like seeing dark storm clouds gathering before you leave the house. The rain isn't hitting you yet, but the clouds are the warning signal, so you grab an umbrella to avoid getting wet.
Exactly. There was a highly relatable and honestly kind of funny example in one of the study guides. A husband is at work, and he receives a text message from his partner. The text contains no words, just a single angry red emoji.
Oh no, that is the ultimate warning signal.
Right. Based on his entire learning history in that relationship, that specific emoji is a CMOR. It signals that if he goes straight home, there will be an argument. An argument is a highly aversive event. The worsening condition is approaching.
So what does he do?
To avoid the argument entirely, to prevent that aversive stimulus from ever occurring, he alters his route. He stops at a sports bar and delays going home.
Wow.
The behavior of going to the bar increases in frequency because it successfully delays or avoids the aversive event. The removal of that impending threat, the subtraction of the argument from his immediate future, reinforces the avoidance behavior.
That is such a crucial distinction. The text message itself doesn't physically hurt him, but the text is the alarm bell. And the behavior of hiding at the sports bar is reinforced by the sheer relief of not having to face the music.
Exactly.
It's still negative reinforcement because the impending threat was subtracted from his reality.
And this is exactly why understanding the underlying function of a behavior is so critical for a behavior analyst. If you were just observing him from the outside, you might think, oh, he just really loves the sports bar.
Right, you'd think he's there for the beer.
Yeah, you might categorize it as positive reinforcement. He is gaining access to beer and television. But if the actual controlling variable, the real reason he's there, is the avoidance of an argument, it is negative reinforcement.
And if you get the function wrong, your entire intervention plan will fail.
Completely fail.
Which perfectly transitions us into the most practical part of this deep dive. Understanding these concepts conceptually as we chat about them is one thing, but applying them correctly on the BCBA exam, under immense pressure with questions designed to trick you, that's a whole different ballgame.
Oh, absolutely. The test writers know how our brains default to everyday definitions.
They absolutely do.
They will craft elaborate scenarios to test if you can turn off your emotional interpretation and rely purely on the behavioral math.
Let's break down the major student misunderstandings that trip people up. Misunderstanding number 1, which you flagged earlier, confusing negative reinforcement with punishment.
This is the #1 killer of test scores in Domain B. You must drill this into your mind until it is second nature. Punishment decreases behavior. Reinforcement, whether it is positive or negative, increases or maintains behavior.
It's always about the increase.
If you are reading a test question and the last sentence says that the future frequency of the behavior went down, it cannot be negative reinforcement.
Right.
The minus sign doesn't mean the behavior went down. The minus sign means a stimulus was removed. If the behavior stopped, it is a form of punishment.
It all comes back to the relief pathway in the brain. Negative reinforcement makes a behavior happen more often because it provides relief. Punishment makes a behavior happen less often because it provides a penalty.
Yeah, like if you touch a hot stove, the burn is added. That's positive.
Yeah.
And you stop touching stoves, that's a decrease. Positive punishment.
Exactly. Or, going back to the car example, if buckling his seatbelt somehow made the car alarm ding louder and faster, Dan would stop buckling his seatbelt. That would be positive punishment.
Right. But because buckling the seatbelt removed the annoying noise, and he buckled up more often in the future, it is negative reinforcement.
Okay, misunderstanding number 2, getting distracted by the intention of the people in the scenario rather than strictly following the data.
They love to do this. The exam will give you these really sympathetic scenarios where a parent or a teacher is desperately trying to stop a dangerous or annoying behavior.
And they will use words that naturally imply punishment, like reprimand, scold, or timeout.
Right. Words that make you think, decrease.
There is a perfect trap question in the mock exams about this. It describes parents who are trying to stop their 5-year-old from sucking his thumb. It's causing dental issues, so the parents decide to verbally reprimand him every single time he puts his thumb in his mouth.
So their intention is absolutely 100% punishment.
Yes. And the scenario says it actually seems to work at home. The thumb sucking drops to 0 when the parents are in the room.
But then the scenario throws the curveball. The parents get a call from the daycare provider.
Right. The provider says the child is now sucking his thumb constantly, more than ever before, the second he gets dropped off at daycare.
Now, behaviorally, this is a concept called behavioral contrast. It's the whack-a-mole effect. You suppress a behavior in one environment with strict punishment, and it explodes in another environment where the punisher isn't present.
But for the sake of the exam question, what does this actually tell us?
It tells us that you cannot rely on the parent's intentions. At home, the yelling functioned as positive punishment. A reprimand was added, and the behavior decreased.
Right. The data showed a decrease at home.
But at daycare, if the test asks you about the behavior's frequency in that specific setting, it has increased. You cannot let the word reprimand trick you into automatically selecting punishment for the whole scenario. You have to read the data for each specific setting.
So how do we bulletproof our test-taking strategy? The materials provide a really solid, foolproof formula for tackling these questions. It is a strict 3-step diagnostic process.
I love this formula.
Step 1, identify exactly whose behavior we are tracking.
It sounds incredibly obvious, but exam questions often describe a chaotic interaction between 2 or 3 people. Like, a student throws a heavy book, the teacher screams and sends the student to the hall, and the principal writes a referral.
It's a mess.
Are we analyzing the student's behavior of throwing the book? Or are we analyzing the teacher's behavior of yelling? You have to draw a circle around the specific actor the question is asking about.
Step 2, look at the future effect of that specific person's behavior. Did the behavior go up or down? This step is magic because it splits your multiple choice options in half immediately.
Such a time saver.
If the scenario says the behavior went up or stayed the same, you physically cross out any answer choice that contains the word punishment. It has to be reinforced.
Step 3, look at the consequence. What happened in the environment immediately following the behavior? Was a stimulus added, presented, turned on, or given? That is your plus sign. That is positive. Or was an aversive stimulus removed, terminated, delayed, or turned off? That is your minus sign. That is negative.
Who is acting? Did the behavior go up or down? Was something added or removed? If you stick to those 3 questions, you remove all the emotional guesswork.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of test strategy, there are also certain keywords that the exam writers use as massive neon signs.
Give us the cheat codes.
If you're reading a scenario and you see the words escape, avoid, delay, postpone, or terminate, those words are pointing almost exclusively straight to negative reinforcement.
Every time.
Basically, they're telling you that an aversive condition was successfully navigated by the behavior, causing the behavior to increase.
Terminate the demand, avoid the noise, escape the fluorescent lights in the classroom. All minus signs, all negative reinforcement.
Conversely, if you see words like gain access, obtain, receive, or earn, you are almost certainly looking at positive reinforcement because something is actively being added to the learner's environment.
It really all comes back to trusting the math. And, well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the B.4 domain. Let's do a very quick rapid-fire recap to solidify this formula in your mind before test day.
Remember, reinforcement is simply the biological process where a consequence increases or maintains the future frequency of a behavior. If it doesn't go up, it's not reinforcement.
Positive means add. It is just a plus sign. You are presenting a stimulus to the environment, like handing a kid a goldfish cracker, pouring yourself a glass of wine, or even a teacher giving a loud reprimand if that student is desperate for attention.
Negative means subtract. It is just a minus sign. You are removing an aversive stimulus from the environment, like crossing off a frustrating math problem, turning off a blaring car alarm, or hiding out at a sports bar to avoid an impending argument.
It is not about society's judgment of good or bad. It is not about a gold star versus a penalty. It is purely about addition, subtraction, and the future frequency of the behavior. We want to remind you once more that this deep dive was brought to you by behavioral intelligence Mara Sánchez, and it was specifically curated for your BCBA exam study purposes.
We highly encourage you to utilize all the resources available to you as you prep. Make sure you follow Amethyst Therapy Services for more incredible mastery tools.
Yes, definitely look them up. You can visit them directly at www.amethysttherapyservices.com or shoot them an email at info@amethysttherapyservices.com.
They understand the nuances and the traps of this exam deeply, and they can really help you navigate them.
As we wrap up this session, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder as you hit the books tonight. We have spent this entire time talking about analyzing other people's behavior. The kids in the clinic, the hall runners, the people avoiding arguments.
But the science of applied behavior analysis applies equally to all of us.
Right. Think about your own study habits right now, sitting wherever you are listening to this.
It is a really revealing piece of self-reflection.
Are you studying for this exam today because you are genuinely looking forward to the pride, the new credential behind your name, and the career advancement of passing? Because if you are, that is a classic positive reinforcement contingency. You are putting in the work to add something highly valuable to your life.
Or are you studying right now simply to escape the anxiety of failing?
Oof.
Are you putting in these grueling hours solely to avoid the highly aversive feeling of sitting in that testing center and realizing you aren't prepared?
If human behavior is always fundamentally driven by gaining something or escaping something, what is the unseen contingency controlling your behavior right now? Are you operating on a plus sign or a minus sign? Think about that as you crack open your next study guide. Keep working hard, trust the math, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.